early Slavs raided the Western Balkans, including Bosnia in the 6th and early 7th century amid the migration period, and were composed of small tribal units drawn from a single Slavic confederation known to the Byzantines as the Sklaveni, whilst the related Antes, roughly speaking, colonized the eastern portions of the Balkans. Tribes recorded by the etonyms of Serb and Croat are described as a second, later migration of different people during the second quarter of the 7th century who do not seem to have been particularly numerous. These early Serb and Croat tribes, whose exact identity is subject to scholarly debate, came to predominate over the Slavs in the neighboring regions. The bulk of Bosnia proper, however, appears to have been a territory between Serb and Croat rule and is not enumerated as one of the regions settled by those tribes. Bosnia is first mentioned as a land in Byzantine Emperor Constantine Porphyrogennetus de Administrando Imperio in the mid-10th century, at the end of the chapter entitled Of the Serbs and the Country in which they now dwell. This has been scholarly interpreted in several ways and used especially by the Serb national ideologists to prove Bosnia as originally a Serb land. Other scholars have asserted the inclusion of Bosnia into Chapter 32 to merely be the result of Serbian Grand Duke Chaslav's temporary rule over Bosnia at the time, while also pointing out Porphyrogennetus does not say anywhere explicitly that Bosnia is a Serb land. In fact, the very translation of the critical sentence where the word Bosona appears is subject to varying interpretation. In time, Bosnia formed a unit under its own ruler who called himself Bosnian. Bosnia, along with other territories, became part of Duklja in the 11th century, although it retained its own nobility and institutions. In the High Middle Ages, political circumstance led to the area being contested between the Kingdom of Hungary and the Byzantine Empire. Following another shift of power between the two in the early 12th century, Bosnia found itself outside the control of both and emerged as the Banat of Bosnia under the rule of local Bans. The first Bosnian Ban, known by the name, was Ban Boric. The second was Ban Kulin, whose rule marked the start of a controversy involving the Bosnian Church, considered heretical by the Roman Catholic Church. In response to Hungarian attempts to use church politics regarding the issue as a way to reclaim sovereignty over Bosnia, Kulin held a council of local church leaders to renounce the heresy and embrace Catholicism in 1203. Despite this, Hungarian ambitions remained unchanged long after Kulin's death in 1204, waning only after an unsuccessful invasion in 1254. During this time, the population was called Dobri Bosnjani, or the Good Bosnians. The names Serb and Croat, though occasionally appearing in peripheral areas, were not used in Bosnia proper. Bosnian history from then until the early 14th century was marked by a power struggle between the Šubić and Kotromanić families. This conflict came to an end in 1322 when Stefan Kotromanić II became Ban. By the time of his death in 1353, he was successful in annexing territories to the north and west, as well as Zahumlje and parts of Dalmatia. He was succeeded by his ambitious nephew Tvrtko, who, following a prolonged struggle with nobility and interfamily strife, gained full control of the country in 1367. By the year 1377, Bosnia was elevated into a kingdom with the coronation of Tvrtko as the first Bosnian king in Mile, near Visoko in the Bosnian heartland. Following his death in 1391, however, Bosnia fell into a long period of decline. The Ottoman Empire had started its conquest of Europe and posed a major threat to the Balkans throughout the first half of the 15th century. Finally, after decades of political and social instability, the Kingdom of Bosnia ceased to exist in 1463 after its conquest by the Ottoman Empire.